Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney of Extreme Metal Podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka Kitty Cat Straight Edge Hardcore Band. Treat by treat, box by box, we're taking it all back.
Nice. I'd buy the $35, or sorry, I'd buy the $75 sweatpants.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I am the black metal guy, aka deliberately growing out my neck beard and only my neck beard to own the libs.
That's a good play, man. I think they'll feel very owned.
Yeah, they'll cower in submission at my sort of massive protrusion of pure logic.
Exactly. No, that's a good thing to bring up, though. You know, deliberately growing your neckbeard to own the libs. What just came out?
Hail! This is Brandon from Cromlech, and you're listening to Terminus.
Well, who'da thunk? Burzum has returned with The Land of Thule. Out now, or a month from now, or a month ago on Byelobog Productions. But is it any good? Let's find out. And now that I've gotten that throwaway joke out of the way, so we are reviewing the new Burzum record, and we're not even sure if we should be, because Hark has released this in a strange way. You didn't, he's continued to pursue the PV amp recording method to its logical conclusion on all fronts. So at this point, what that means is rejecting the format of the album as we usually know it. He's just trickling out tracks, track by track. Some people have claimed that these are demos for an album that is not set yet or not done. Varg on his channel just described them as the tracks of a new metal album. There are different versions floating around on YouTube, depending on who stopped incorporating tracks at which point. What I'll say is we tested a couple of them, and the version that plays best, at least so far, is the 42-minute and 11-second version on the Metal Vault channel. Unfortunately, Metal Vault has mislabeled the tracks. There are actually 5 tracks on the release we are reviewing. 1, The Magic of the Grave. 2, The Hidden Name. 3, The Nature of the Gods. 4, The Call of the Kraken. And 5, Beyond the Gate. We've tried a 50 or 60 minute version with a couple more ambient tracks added, and as far as I can tell, that just really fucks up the pacing, and this version is better. So we're just going to go with that. If in 4 months Varg releases the real album and it is radically different from the thing we've reviewed here, what the hell? It's Burzum. We'll review it again. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty sure we conferred, and we're pretty sure that this is a reasonable representation of what's coming out. These tracks have been floating around as albums for a month or more, so it felt like time to address it. And now, as mighty Perquanos is thundering over my recording studio, let's start delving into it. So as you've noted before, like, we kind of have to start with a referendum on Burzum, basically, just because we haven't reviewed a Burzum record before on this show, and Varg's music is so singular that it actually comes up in reviews of other bands less than you'd expect, especially because what?
Oh, I was just going to say, Burzum has just been so completely incorporated into the black metal framework, it's, like, redundant to say something sounds like Burzum.
Yes. And to the extent that you could, the high water mark of sort of overt Burzum influence was probably in the early 2000s, where you had various kinds of DSBM or droney, doomy, pagan black metal bands that really you could hear kind of sounded like Burzum. I mean, even, I think back in the day, probably everyone described Druk's Forgotten Legends as sounding like Burzum, even though now you would just say, it sounds like Druk. Mm-hmm. Right. So there was a period when Burzum was a more on the tip of everyone's tongue in terms of influence. But obviously his work remains extremely important still, and it's usually a sign of a special or very interesting record when we do end up talking about Burzum for one reason or another. I think... So I could say some things about, how this relates to the post-prison Burzum stuff, or do we want to step back more and talk more about Varg the character?
I think we have to talk about Varg the character. I literally wrote in my notes that it's I'm sure this will be a referendum on Burzum, but I want to keep my notes locked in on the album. But there is no real way to talk about newer Burzum without talking about Varg and his, I will politely say, a deeply complicated relationship with his own work.
Yeah, so you have some good thoughts on that, and it relates to some things we've said about certain other Norwegians as well.
Yeah, so my thing, I have not...
Also, wait, sorry, before you get fully into it, I should do a brief disclaimer.
Yeah.
With somebody like Varg, the lore is always changing. Varg does a fair amount of narrating and re-narrating of his own life and work, and there's a lot of Varg lore, basically, between the old Thulean perspective writing and the Thulean perspective video content and the new TikToks and whatever. So it's possible that there's some sort of important thing Varg has said recently that we won't mention here. Just tell us in the comments and we'll tell you what we think.
Yeah, I doubt there's something that's going to completely recontextualize everything about the man. But if there is, then sure, present it to us. Okay.
Back to you.
Okay. I have not really kept up on post-prison Burzum. I am I don't talk about it much. I'm an enormous fan of the original Burzum albums, just as you should be as someone that likes black metal. Hivisla Taros is definitely a top 10 black metal record of all time for me. Yada yada, I think they're all brilliant. However, even back in the day, I was not excited by the idea of more Burzum after jail. A lot of people were, and I understand that, but I thought the circle was complete and closed after the first 6 records. I think Dowdy Balders and Hildskjalf have things to recommend for them also. I think they're an important part. So I heard Belus back in the day out of curiosity, and at the Black Metal Guy's behest, I listened to it today for a little bit more context. It's pretty good. It doesn't touch the original works for me, but I understand that it's a big one for you, and that's totally fine. But it's also closer to styles of black metal that you're more inherently interested than I am. I have not really followed most of the rest of the post-prison work, and in a large part it is because of the kind of, at least to me, absurd relationship that Varg has with his own fame, the sort of strange, inconsistent way he describes his previous work. The whole thing just reached a point of just sort of absurdity and a sort of normal culture absurdity. I was just not compelled in one way or another to be concerned about the things that Varg had to say. because I thought that the statement was complete with the first 6 records, and the idea of watching a bunch of videos that he records in a tractor or something is not really my thing. But the primary thing that I want to say, and I don't know if this is a hot take, but it's my take, is that nobody has... yeah. Nobody has done more to undercut the legacy of Burzum than Varg himself. This is a guy who seems to relish in talking about what he perceives as the inadequacy of his prior work. There's a sort of simmering contempt he has for the influence that Burzum had on black metal, or just the fact that black metal people still really like Burzum. The fact that that is his audience seems to rub him the wrong way. But what we talked about this a little bit last night, and it's almost a pattern of the classic Norwegian bands undercutting themselves. Immortal turns into a Kiss parody band. Gorgoroth eats itself from within with a bunch of obnoxious legal issues after the band was already on a massive downturn. Emperor, Isan becomes a tiny sunglasses guy and spends all of his time trying to appeal to the prog nerds who aren't even listening to his new stuff. And, of course, we have Burzum, where Varg has, whether you find the things he has to say interesting or not, become a sort of comical figure in the metal scene. And try as I might to separate the art from the artist, because I generally believe in that principle, Varg does his absolute best to make that impossible in any discussion of his music, which leaves us here. Attempting to review a Burzum record without the endless memory of everything that has occurred up to this point, which is impossible. But we're gonna try to negotiate it as best we can, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, where to go from there? I mean, yeah, I agree. There is definitely this pattern to the Norwegians. We have talked about it most on this show with Dark Throne, right? Right, we will never let them escape their glorious past, try as they might. And there does seem some anxiety of... I mean, the underlying concern is, right, if you're constantly shit-talking your past work... Well, Dark Throne don't shit-talk, right? Varg shit-talks his past work, and more than that, the scene that he helped found. Yeah. And behind that, you could say, okay, I think there really are certain lofty artistic and ideological aspirations he had that he felt were not fulfilled by the original scene. Okay, fair enough. But you can say that without having this kind of almost an Oedipus complex about yourself. Right? you don't need to, right? You don't need to sort of rage against your own past in that way, especially not if you're a traditionalist, right? And the death metal guy has speculated, and I think there's probably something to it, that Varg's sort of dismissal of his past work and his very deliberately understated delivery of his new stuff. Belus had some fanfare around it, which was appropriate, but once we get to the records past 2012 and 2013, right? Skiptar, my god, that one sucked. The records after 2012 are pretty bad, and were all presented in a very sort of, here I am, just, I guess, putting something out there kind of way. And now this one is being sort of trickled out in this semi-official way. All of this downplaying might indicate a concern about whether he actually can live up to his past work.
Yeah, I believe that it is a defensive posture. It's a preemptive self-defense, in a sense.
Yes. And, right, it's like, well, and we all do that in little ways. The classic thing of, being a metal guy, who records music is like you send around a track to someone and you're like, hey man, yeah, of course, still working on the vocals and hasn't been mixed yet. Anyway, just wanted to hear what you think, right? And then you just sit there sweating, hoping the other person types back, "This is genius."
Yeah.
Right. Right. And if they haven't put like a little like on your message, you know, after a month, you
just instantly commit suicide.
Yeah, you actually instantly, yes, yeah, you emit but so artistic anxiety is understandable, and it's how you respond to it that counts. Dark Throne is another band where I think that might seem like an absurd claim to make about Varg, who in many ways obviously has nothing to prove and feels very comfortable putting himself out there. But if you think about a band like Dark Throne, where they don't dismiss their past work, they just completely refuse to try, right? Every new record is them just dicking around in some different way. They're only halfway good when Fenriz leaves them alone and lets Nocturno write riffs. Dark Throne are very clearly running from their past out of a kind of artistic anxiety, and I think it's not unreasonable to apply that to Burzum. We tried to come up with some counterexamples too from the early 90s scene when we were talking this over last night, and the point was it was almost all dudes who weren't Norwegians or were on the very margins of the Norwegian scene, right? There's like tons of exceptions that confirm the rule, like what about Ildjarn or the guy from Thorns? Well, those guys are both temperamentally very similar to a later kind of black metal guy who just keeps going. But these guys didn't. They just wandered off into the woods and went silent. And when you get to other people from that generation, it's not Norwegians. It's Marduk are at least as old as the Norwegian guys, if not a bit older, and doing it earlier. And they have remained just one of the most consistent bands in metal ever. Right? Never stopped doing it, right? Or then on the other hand, a guy like Rob Darkin, who in many ways patterns himself off Varg. Darkin has released some crap albums, but he has kept it real and has kept releasing good records with serious effort behind them on and off for quite a long time. So it's just something, we could go off on a whole thing about why did this happen in Norway and not in the places they influenced. And that's its own conversation, and it has to do with the Norwegians getting caught in this sort of rock star hype vortex and never really recovering from it. But you get the point. That pattern might kind of apply to Varg. But and it means that inevitably we approach this record via his public persona. Okay, but here's the other thing to consider. Varg is a genius. All right, Varg is absolutely a genius, and he is he has kind of characteristic. The public persona is affected by characteristic problems of geniusness. For instance, right? He's this sense. I'm not as critical about his stupid statements about his own work because I just treat him as a fundamentally unreliable narrator.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
I just, Varg works in absolutes, right? Varg has very powerful emotions which change, but whenever he's in the emotion, that's his truth, right? So there's two schools of YouTube commenters on a new Burzum record. It's, oh my gosh, I thought he would never release music again, right? And then other people are like, oh, who's so what? More music from Varg, right? And the point is, you could start to have a contempt for him, right? It's like, he said he was never going to release music again, but he released music again. When's this guy going to quit? Neither of these is the right answer. Varg will always say he is never playing black metal again and always release black metal again. When he for some reason feels like he has to stop, to him that's an absolute. and he will put it that way. And then, the seasons revolve, the chariots of the gods roll across the sky, and when the time is right, Varg is like, maybe I'll play some black metal again. Now, at times, I think that has been sort of crass paycheck or attention bids, right? It's hard to think anything else of the records that came out after Fallen, I think, really. Belus and Fallen were great, but like, there are, he has this angst about his relationship to the music. It's, he can't live with it, but he can't live without it. And what that means is, in practice, Varg, you actually love black metal.
Yeah.
You actually care about it very much, and it's the thing that you do. And you don't need to beat yourself up about it so much. But yeah, and the idea that Varg talks in absolutes helps make some sense of his Thulean perspective stuff too. I mean, Varg has pissed off a lot. Varg has obviously pissed off the people you would expect him to piss off with that, but he's also pissed off a ton of people on the right. He's seen as kind of a lolcow or an irksome thorn in the side of many people who share some or all of his worldview, right? In many ways. So he's sort of has this divisive presence online, and it's because he talks in this way, right? Varg says things that might sound very extreme or just completely made up, right? And people, for understandable reasons, find that, off-putting or find that it undermines his credibility or whatever. The important thing is, Varg talks in exactly the same way he writes lyrics. Mm-hmm. It's in exactly the same way he makes music and art. If you interrogate any given Burzum lyric or lyric of any black metal record, or really any piece of music, as to its truth or falsity, right? Is this an accurate truth claim about the world? Is this a fact? You're gonna, let's say many if not most of them will come up as untruths or fictions or lies, right? If you test art in that way. But what all of them, if you approach them as truth claims, but what all of them work at is value indicators, right? Art shows you through a series of extreme, intensified, exaggerated, imaginative, or fictional kind of statements. Art shows you an order of values. It shows you what is cool. Or maybe, if you're doing a certain kind of critical art, what is not cool. But black metal works by showing you what is cool, or a certain facet of coolness that most people would like to sweep under the rug, and Varg's public persona is exactly like that. We could fact check or critically think or ethically critique everything Varg says, and maybe sometimes we'd be like, well, maybe that just makes sense, or well, he's wrong on this but he's right on that, or where the fuck is he getting that? We could do that for everything, but that's sort of missing the point. Right? Like the way that Varg talks about, he's gotten in a lot of arguments with people about his interpretation of paganism. From an academic standpoint or a sort of scholarly traditionalist standpoint or whatever, right? Varg in many ways does not have a leg to stand on. On the other hand, he has a point. And part of the reason people find him so frustrating is that his idea of a source is basically, it came to me in a dream. Mm-hmm. Right? Varg has read things, but he's done very eccentric personal reading and personal exploration of the world, and he trusts himself almost. His artistic self-trust extends to everything else, right? You have to have immense self-trust to make art and to just trust that, okay, I'm putting out this expression of my primordial instincts and it's going to be cool. That's how he deals with his historical, philosophical, political, personal life statements too. He just sort of puts it out there with this immense degree of self-trust, and you have to make of it what you will, right? And that's part of what can make him a confusing and maddening persona. But it's because of this sort of to figure out what Varg really means, or what is of value in what Varg is saying, you have to focus more on the total picture that emerges from it, rather than just, is he talking out of his ass, right? And the thing that this parallels is Kanye, right? I think Varg, Varg has somehow, in his career beyond black metal, been immensely, despite the sort of fumbling and kooky nature of a lot of what he does, he's been immensely effective. And we are now living in Varg's world, whether we like it or not. We are living in the Varg. We're living in the Varg Kanye vortex. There is somehow an indirect conversation taking place between an artist who is supposed to be on the absolute margins of, or absolute outside of acceptable discourse, and an artist who is supposed to be absolutely at its center. And neither of them is where they're supposed to be right now. And they're somehow communicating with one another indirectly. Kanye is absorbing something from this, and some kind of interaction is happening. Kanye temperamentally is a very similar guy to Varg. Kanye just says a ton of crazy shit. And if you isolate all the crazy shit he says, at least 50% of it is either, is of questionable substance or truth value, right? But when you look at the total picture, right, the guy obviously has something to say. And he also just works by extremes, right? 1 minute he passionately believes this, 1 minute he passionately believes the next thing, 1 minute he says this about this. It's this continuous circulation of statements that seem to contradict one another, and you have to step back and look at how all of that lines up, and how it lines up with what he does, right? So I thought that comparison was worth making, because I don't know where else I would make it.
That's why you have a show.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about it. But yeah, so basically, there's something. There's obviously something potentially off-putting or discrediting about Varg's public presence. On the other hand, it's more related to his art than you might think, and the things that are the wackiest about it are the things that relate most to his art. So now I guess to get back to the discography. Belus, right? This, to me, we've talked on the show about solar metal a lot, right? This is kind of, I guess, one of our major thematic strands, right? And for anyone who's new to the show, you can go listen to the big episode on Spite Extremewing if you haven't already, right? Where we deal with that in depth. This shift, in many ways, this shift in mood in black metal from more of a nocturnal to a solar affect sort of jives with certain things Varg has said, right? His own criticisms of black metal, right? It's in its attempts to be evil and whatever, right? He's like, no, you're missing the point. And with certain things he's already done in his work. So if Spite Extremewing, if their work in the early 2000s is one pillar of the solar metal tradition, the other pillar of it, which we almost never mention in connection with it, is Belus. Belus is, to me, I think it is, Varg thought it was his best record and encapsulated everything he wanted to do up to that point, with everything he was trying to do before. I kind of agree. Belus is it's questionable whether it's a black metal or metal record, but it's definitely some kind of solar extreme music with drums and guitar. And this was the guy who was known, still by that time in 2010, this is before all the YouTube videos and whatever, everyone in 2010, people would I'm sure half the people still thought he was a Satanist, right? You know what I mean, right? Burzum, oh yeah, super evil, Satan, man, right? He comes back from prison with this sort of calm, meditative, but deeply centered, but highly intense sort of cycle of songs dedicated to the death and rebirth of the sun. To the sun god Baldur, or Belus if you track the philology further back. Mm-hmm. And that record is just so different from the kind of record people expected him to make. But it has this sort of glimmering, shining tone. It's you can hear all the influence of the Tangerine Dream and the Cure and other sort of goth and electronic bands Varg was listening to back in the day. The folkiness in it is even stronger. It has all the drone of the earlier stuff, but the tonality is very, very different. It is these rich, flourishing, full bar chords. It's a really remarkable record, and only a few people on our show have ever talked about that. I think the guy from Oldowan Gash mentioned it as an important record. And this is one of those records that I think people are still catching up to. People are like, oh yeah, that's the new Burzum record. It's pretty good. Well, it doesn't have to be your favorite, right? You could make a good case for any one of the original ones to be your favorite. But like, it's a really important album. And I think The Land of Thule is basically, I guess Fallen was essentially, the follow-up to it was basically, I think, leftover tracks, basically from the Belus writing sessions that were also really good, but fit less in the seamless continuity and were more just like standalone metal bangers.
Yeah.
Fallen's a good record. It has some also very beautiful melodies on it, very cool tracks. But the record that really picks up where Belus left off in terms of this sort of integrated black metal transformed into ambient music concept is this one. And I think it does it really well and in a way that will probably frustrate even more people.
That's a fair characterization. This is... Your appreciation of this record is deeply tied to your appreciation of, like, its conceit. You know? It depends on...
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it depends on how compelled you are by the idea of Varg very, very deliberately and very, like, in his fashion, attempting to, like, create a new model of, like, traditionalist or folk music using bits of black metal past and some other metal technique and a lot of ambient. Like, whether that idea appeals to you, let's have Varg just take a shot at deciding what this, I don't know, current pagan music should be. You know, his idea of that. Like, does that compel you as a listener? That like sort of is the record, because on a purely material basis, this is relatively thin material. That doesn't mean bad, but it does mean that there's not a whole lot of parts on this album. Most tracks are usually two riffs. Maybe there's a bridge somewhere in there, but it's primarily just alternation of a couple different parts, and variations and layers are slowly piled on in an ambient fashion. When I first heard this record, at first blush, I thought it was supposed to be sort of a play on Hivisleset Taras, but it's not. It's pretty far from that, actually. This is not primarily a black metal record, and that was. But maybe there is a similar sense of, trying to push things forward to a similar degree in the way that Hivisleset did. For me personally...
Right, because Hivisleset was kind of radically drony and textured for its time.
Yeah, especially coming off the heels of Detsom Engangvar. It's pretty out there. It's still my favorite Burzum record. In terms of my personal feelings on this record... The conceit doesn't do much for me, but that kind of doesn't matter. I don't especially like this, but it kind of doesn't matter because I'm not the intended audience. It's... there's a lot of stuff on this that is good. Varg is still far beyond most people in his ability to make... simple melodic ideas work in a profound way. He can generate atmosphere like basically no one else. Listening to this is an experience. So, I don't know, man. I don't like it, but I recommend everyone listen to it. Maybe that's my nutshell description.
Well, for sure, I wouldn't want all new. I wouldn't want this to be the sole foundation for new pagan music solely because I would, I gotta have a. Can I have a few blast beats?
Yeah.
Can I have some hotter distortion or whatever? But I don't find the lack of those to be a shortcoming on this record, right? I can but I get you. I see what you mean, right? I'm certainly interested. I want to hear what Varg's idea of this music is.
You want to hear the hot take, and
right.
For me, that's not of a ton of interest. And also, just aesthetically, I'm gonna be straightforward. I'm gonna be blunt because I'm respectful of the artist. Mm-hmm. Much of this does sound like music for gnomes of some kind. There is a gnomish quality to this music.
I think that's intention. I mean,
I'm sure it is, but
it's definitely intentional. But it's Varg is
those industrious little guys.
I think that's the other. I mean, I think that's the thing that surprised a lot of people about Thulean Perspective was that they, they either expected him to be like a bad person thinking his evil thoughts in his castle, or to be like a severe and ruminant Hyperborean power thane, and we're surprised to hear him like making jokes and enjoying the whimsical and cute side of life.
Yeah,
and that's kind of, and he wants to, his vision of black metal incorporating the solar element or creating a more solar, life-affirming pagan music incorporates many of the moods that we have pushed off to the side in genres such as dungeon synth or, Rose McDowell neofolk or whatever. Those are all sort of spilling into this record. Mm-hmm. It's a willfully gnomish.
It's willfully gnomish. I like that. Well, how about I play a sample so they can get an idea? So I'm going to play some material off the first track, The Magic of the Grave. And this will function, I think, pretty well as like a representative slice of the record. A lot of this is, the basic form of this music is sort of cut from the same conceptual cloth as Philosophem. Where, we've got two primary melodic themes that bounce against each other and they sort of grow in parallel. The difference here is that the very deliberately austere production job. There's not a lot of distortion on the guitars. There's, I think, all of one double kick section on the drums. on the second track, I believe. But all that being said, this seems a little bit closer to maybe what Varg wanted originally, and it sort of strikes me as something like Dowdy Balders presented as a metal record. And yeah, that's pretty representative of most of the record. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. The death metal guy actually has a very funny note there. He said, "This suffices as a microcosm of the record." This is something that, yeah. There's something a little there's an edge on that statement that I appreciate.
It's like I've run into this problem a few times on the show where it's like I try to be like I take pride in having a sort of critical honesty to me, where it's like I feel like I can identify something executed well even if I don't like it and still give it a recommendation.
Yeah.
I'll be honest about my feelings, but in this case it's like, wow, Varg has really mastered an atmosphere and an aesthetic that I have like zero interest in. This sort of deliberately quiet and understated and reserved presentation, the breathy vocals, the deliberately sort of tinny guitar and drum tones. In a sense, there's something cool about it. There's certain weird sort of like experimental doom bands from the 2000s that did stuff almost like this, like playing with really low distortion and super sparse, spaced out compositions. And I thought that was neat, but it's hard to listen to this and listen to how good some of the melodies are, because I think actually all those melodies are really, really good in this passage, and not wish that they were turned into riffs,
Yeah, I hear that. I mean...
Yeah, they're not riffs.
I guess they're not. I mean, but it's interesting. Yeah, maybe that's a good case of something that, like... Yeah, I hear that. What makes them not feel like riffs? Is it just the fact they're arpeggiated, or is it more just the delivery?
It's a combination of all of the above. Yeah, it's pretty much constantly arpeggiated. Very few, true like chorded riffs.
I guess it's plucked. Like the arpeggios are exclusively plucked and maybe exclusively down plucked.
Yeah, I'm not.
No.
Sure.
He's not constant. He's not constant down picking, but it's very distinct. He's not tremolo picking or doing continuous eighth notes on these arpeggios or anything like that. These are he's letting them ring in a way that, in the really strict sense, a riff should have some continuity to it. Mm-hmm. And these are not driving in the way that a riff is.
No, these are like sluggish summertime songs. Which like works for the aesthetic that it's going for. It's just it is not music that thrives on excitement.
No, for sure. I think he's, Varg probably he spends most of his time on. I mean, well, it's weird. Aside from spending his time like skitzing out on the internet, right, by like engaging with the most trashy sphere of culture, which is short form video content, which we would never stoop to making ever in order to up our views or numbers. But like aside from his weird skirmishes with mass culture, Varg spends most of his time just on a farm in the French countryside, like running around. His wife made hobbit outfits for his kids, and he leads them on expeditions through the woods. It's tills the crops and whatever. So I think he's trying to, he's found some value in a rejection of excitement, and probably the polemical angle here is like the world wants us to be excited all the time, and maybe one of the problems Varg has with metal is like it's too close to rock and roll and MTV mass culture's urge that we be constantly
stimulated in some sense.
Stimulated and possessed, sort of like enthusiastic, not in the sense of excited, but in the sense of like this having this kind of like possession-like experience by popular culture, right? So like Varg is like, look, you don't, right, being a it's there's something sort of powerful in calm and immovable stability.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I
the image on the cover appears to be of a dragon that has died guarding its treasure. Mm-hmm. I.e., instead of going in there and slaying the dragon, the hero has simply outlasted him. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of Varg's survival strategy. Right?
Yeah.
Both for himself and for his people. Right. Mm. So but I get it, right? It's not, it's not exciting.
Yeah.
And I listen to, you listen to, there's a whole roster of like more sort of upbeat or well-adjusted music that you listen to that I don't. But for me, I think there's a whole thing of sort of like tranquil ambient music that I like that you just have no time for.
Yeah, like sort of like also just sort of this like pastoral stuff. I guess
that's
doesn't
true.
do
That's
much for me. Yeah.
Yes, you are much more interested in sort of the severe built world of humanity than in nature. And to the extent that you're interested in nature aesthetics, it's when it's sort of, the shit we all usually like, and vast blade like mountains and thunderbolts and shit, right?
I'm not into this Emersonian take so much,
Yes, there is something Emersonian about this. Yes, it is, and Thoreau, right? It's there's some sort of like softly ecstatic, pastoral mysticism here for sure. And I I don't think that's the certainly not the you can't live on that alone. I certainly can't. I need some double bass.
Yeah, but it holds it holds appeal to you, and that
it holds a special place in my heart. Yes,
Yeah.
both in my listening, like I like slow dive, and in like this feels like later, more austere slow dive stuff.
That's an interesting comparison.
And in my daily life, right? I like wandering around in the woods and parks and stuff.
And that's all cool, and that's why it's like, even if I don't like this, I still recommend it, because it's like the audience for this will love it, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's keep going through.
So another just one more musical point that was very obvious there. The melody was this kind of do 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 do. I'm not humming it well at all. Dun 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 dun. Anyway, point being, I was trying to remind people, because we've been talking for so long, but I really fucked that one up. There are these very crisply separated notes in these arpeggios. The end of every arpeggio is almost always the first note of the next one, which is a very odd way to do it. It's different from how you would write those if you were tremoloing them, or if you did, it would give them a very odd shape. Basically, it creates a melody that is staggered in ways that you wouldn't expect. It's not like each arpeggio turns around into the next one, or very often, right, you do an arpeggio somewhere on the fretboard and then just somewhere completely different, right?
It gives it some
sort of flourish.
It gives it a kind of creaking quality.
Yes, there's something I wrote in the notes, staggered, right? There's something a little bit. I like creaking too. It pauses in places you wouldn't expect. Sways, creaks, staggers.
Maybe that's a good description. This is music that very deliberately does not sound young. This is music that is about a substantially older experience.
That's a good point. It's like wood creaking in an old wooden structure, right? But the other thing it does is it creates a sense of intense continuity, right? He finishes an arpeggio, and then the bass note of the next one is the first note of the last one. And if you trace that shape imaginatively in the air, it's like literal. You can visualize it as a chain or a helix. So there's a kind of cool incantatory quality to these, even though they sound childishly simple. I think he's really interested in this kind of combination of staggering and swaying with this Norse knotwork of melody.
That is a really nice way to describe it. Yeah, you're making me a little more charmed by this.
Well, thanks, bro. Yeah, if you can't be bowled over by it, we'll go for charmed.
I don't think
charmed by the kindly gnomes.
I don't think you can be bowled over by this record. I think it's not.
No, I'm not bowled over by it. Although it is a very it was very moving to me. Especially the last track, which we'll talk a lot about. But next one is The Hidden Name. Basically, this is the part. This is the obligatory black metal part, and it really shows, the fact this is the exception that confirms the rule on this record. However, it also shows something else, is that Varg isn't, instead of just reacting against the black metal by making ambient stuff, he really is making a sincere effort here to integrate those sides into something, right? This has drums the whole time. It has somewhat harsh vocals, and here you're going to get the on the ambient to metal continuum, you're going to get a part that would remind you of, something like Fistless at Taros. Oh, sorry, I kept watching the lightning. It's I mean, that I feel like there's almost not that much to discuss there, right? Basically, there's just one really good sounding drone note.
Yeah,
I love how he's picking that.
Yeah, it's just an octave. Yeah.
Yeah. And just picking it, and I just no. Just the way he picks it, it sounds great. Some people can do it, some people can't. And then the really crucial part there is that the leitmotif throughout it is that ascending melody. It has the brightness of one of the melodies on Belus. Obviously, on Belus, they were usually fleshed out with, much larger chords and much denser arrangements in general. But it's this gleaming little shafts of sunlight kind of melody. And the part that really makes it is the bum note he throws in it at the end. Which it sounds like, right? He does this. It has a pretty consistent spiraling ascent to it, and then he just goes bow, or bow, sort of breaks the continuity of it, but it doesn't really sound. It sounds dissonant without sounding dissonant, if that makes sense. It doesn't do the thing that mutilation does.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
It's dissonant, but it's still like naturalistic.
Yes, it doesn't sour the riff or sound sort of twisted. It introduces much more tension than you were expecting, but it just sets up the next ascent. So it's an interesting way of Varg still being in touch with the darker undertones of his music, but just using them in a very sparing way.
Yeah. I think that, and I think that fits the comparison to Belus, because like what struck me listening to that album today was how much just like dirty old school black metal stuff is still on it. How many like Ablaze in the Northern Sky riffs are on it, But he still manages to take that material and create this more souler, more open thing out of it, which is very interesting. That's not something anyone really tries to do anymore if they're trying to make, I don't know, what are we all calling it, triumphant black metal now?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah.
No, so this is an interesting track.
That's not what our brand is. Solar metal. We will stay on brand.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, this is an interesting one because it is, again, the most strikingly straightforward, more black metal track on it. But I think we both agree the best one on the record is the last track, Beyond the Gate, right? Yeah,
it's almost like most of it is a warm-up for Beyond the Gate.
Yeah. This is really cool. We both sample off of this one. And really, I want to say, so I like the riffs. This one is largely based on a sort of summoning style riff, a weird little palm muted figure. Summoning, of course, probably owes most of what they do to Burzum in some form or fashion. So the shared genealogy makes sense there.
Sure.
And I like the melodic idea of using a very conventional pentatonic figure and drawing atmosphere out of that and making it really mystical. When it comes to simple melodies being way more than the sum of their parts, the man's still got it. Black metal guy, my man, talking about daffodils on this song. I think that's a first on the show, and possibly a first for me ever.
Yeah, well, you could say he picked your flower.
Yeah, he certainly did. So anyway, this is cool. I really like the overall effect of this. I think the primary riff is sort of brilliant. It's sort of a play off of Our Foes Shall Fall off of Summoning's Let Mortal Heroes Sing Your Fame. They play like a really similar kind of riff as like the anchor on that track. I don't think that he probably got it from there, but they probably listened to a lot of the same stuff.
And if there was a black metal band that Varg secretly listened to, of course it would be Summoning.
That would totally track. Yeah. But yeah, I think this is really cool. I think that he, again, the guy's ability to draw out really expansive atmospheres from very simple materials is basically unparalleled. I think that as... Maybe my answer is just like, I don't like this as a metal record, but I think I like it as an ambient album.
Yeah, for sure. It simply is not. I mean, yes, as a metal record, it simply doesn't do the things we need a metal record to do.
I'm kind of surprised that Varg described these as some more metal tracks, you know?
I think what he meant, okay, and here's me again trying to be the Varg whisperer, but like... I think what he means here is pay attention to these.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think, and I think he understands that, like, he likes his ambient work, but there is a deliberate slightness to it, right? Mm. There are a few... I've listened to post-prison Varg ambient, and some of it's awesome. There's memorable tracks, but, like, you know, there's some intensity that is not there on the more metal stuff. And I think this is, when he says it's a metal record, he means, okay, it has guitars, it has vocals, it has some harsher vocals and guitars. Yeah. And yes, I would file this much more under not so much rebirth of black metal as another question we've talked about on the show, which is how do you make a certain kind of ambient music more musically engaging?
Yeah.
Right. In a way, this might be the best neofolk record that comes out this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is in a large part basically a neofolk record.
Yeah. But insofar as there's any real heaviness on this record, it's on this track. Like the way, like there are particular moments where the core melody comes back in and locks in with the vocals towards the end there when he goes like the sun shining, and it's really heavy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. If there's another word that I would use for this record that's musically descriptive, although not like descriptive of the mood, is that it's kind of doomy in a weird way. I think of this as sort of a neo-folk doom ambient record.
That's a very good characterization. I'm glad you mentioned the doom thing. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, in a way, this has more in common with skepticism.
Yeah, definitely.
It's that summoning skepticism secret kinship. And it's here too. This is just the softest version of skepticism you could ever do.
Yeah, that's fair.
You can't fit the organ in the gnome house.
It's too big, and their houses are so small. They're just little guys.
Well, on a musical level, the death metal guy has summed up the virtues of this track quite nicely. I thought I would just add more on. This is a real epic. It does transform over its course, although the basic musical ideas remain shockingly similar. But the mood does change. And that has to do with the lyrics. There's a lot of lyrics on this record. I've seen on some upload versions, someone has done some very nice transcribing of the lyrics. They haven't got them all yet, but the lyrics are also very audible. And so what's the conceit for this song? Well, it's called Beyond the Gate, right? And this is the guy who's written tracks called like My Journey to the Stars and tracks, records about the Black Gates of Mordor and stuff, right? So that's a pretty typical black metal title. And you might think, okay, well, Beyond the Gate, what does that usually mean? Well, it's the passage to the underworld or the other world, right? Or to Valhalla. So Varg looks beyond the gate, and what does he see? The second line is, a world so great. And then he goes on to describe this beautiful world rolling from, the mountains and the lakes, from inorganic nature onto the woods, and he's sort of ritually naming over the trees and the flowers and the birds of the wood. And he's doing it in this sort of rapt way. You can hear how it's influenced by, probably romantic poetry and things like that, but it's different from it because it's much more like a prayer, right? He's really like, it's ritual naming, invoking all of these things. And as he goes, what stands out about it is, well, he looks beyond the gate, and what does he see? It's, Ian Curtis looks beyond the veil, and there's nothing there at all, right? Varg looks beyond the gate, and what does he see? It's exactly the same as this world, except it's everything that is best and most beautiful in this world concentrated and purified, right? What he finds beyond the gate is, there's not a beyond nature. There's not a sort of absolutely transcendent reality. He's not like one with Brahma or something. He's not in some, like super satanic ultra realm where, you're just like throwing lightning bolts at angels all the time. It's just this world. And that is an extremely pagan vision of the afterlife, right? In a lot of ways, the Valhalla myth is supposed to be this distillation and concentration of everything that is highest in life, although, of course, it's more focused on human action than nature. But he does this, he's completely, as a poet, he's completely faithful to the conceit of the song. And he follows it as far as it goes, just as the Valhalla myth does. So let's go to towards a few minutes after the Death Metal Guy sample, or 4 fucking minutes after the Death Metal Guy sample ends. We're going to start at just shy of the 38-minute mark. So you heard what he did there. Mm-hmm. It sort of it trails off and then starts to build again. And in this catalog of the things he sees beyond the gate, from the birds and the trees, suddenly we're at darkness, pain, and winter. He hits pain so hard there. Mm-hmm. Shadows, pain, and decay. That's beyond the gate too, because it's nature or supernature. You don't escape that in the afterlife, and and the gods don't escape it either. There's no way out of that. But what he offers is the pagan vision of cyclic regeneration, not redemption, but regeneration. And from there, the sun breaks out again, and he returns to the incantation, but he starts cycling through some of those, these sort of reassuring, beautiful aspects of nature. And as he goes, he weaves the darker notes back in. So he keeps returning to the darkness, pain, winter, as the song goes on and wraps up, even as the melody returns to the much brighter mood. So that mode of it's like what he did with the bum note earlier, right? He emphatically incorporates the darkness and weaves it back into the knot work.